Welcome to the Talking Toughness series of podcasts, where we examine the mental toughness concept with guests from a wide range of sectors, illustrating that our mental approach to what happens to us and around us matters for all of us. Our guests come from the worlds of business and public service, education, social mobility, sport and health. They all share their experiences and their observations about the factors that have enabled them to survive and to thrive on their journey through life. Many guests have gone further and incorporated the concept into what they do as coaches, trainers, managers and leaders, helping others to thrive in their turn. Their experiences are valuable to those of us who strive to do the same. Good morning, John. How are things on the west coast of Ireland today?
Things on the west coast of Ireland are great, thanks, Doug. Yeah, pretty good. Just trudging through things in the day job, marking essays and case studies and that kind of thing. But you packing for a holiday, I believe?
I am. We do get holidays occasionally, so I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going onto the East Coast, very close to our mutual friend, Professor Clough, so I might even bump into him.
Maybe, yeah. So talking about England, I think we're heading back to England today, aren't we, for this podcast?
We are, and we've got a really great guest today. We've got Joanne Taylor. And I'm just checking, Joanne and I have known each other since 2009, so that's quite some time. And from almost all of that time, she's been somebody that has been working with the mental toughness concept. Joanne is a coach and a trainer, but she's currently a people and performance consultant with ARK Consultancy, and we'll explore ARK Consultancy a little later. But since she joined ARK Consultancy, she's been instrumental in taking the concept into a comparatively new area, the area of social mobility. I mean, we tend to do most of our work in sports, business, and so on. But there are people who are using the concept in the area of social mobility, that is working with people who are disadvantaged in some way, usually economically, socially, and there are other reasons. But it's important to help them to understand how they can prosper despite their current circumstances. So it's great to have Jo with us today. Welcome, Jo. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for inviting me along today. Looking forward to speaking to you both.
Great. I think we can start perhaps. I've mentioned ARK Consultancy, and we're going to be talking about the things that you've been doing with the mental toughness concept and the questionnaire, which I think a lot of people are going to be very interested in. And in recent times, a lot of that has been to do with the work that ARK Consultancy does. So perhaps you can just tell us for a moment what it is that ARK Consultancy does.
Yeah, so ARK are typically a housing consultancy working in the public sector. So we're 35 years old, and as you mentioned before, I very much work in the people side of the business. So we work with housing associations, local authorities, but in my side of the business, we also work with charities, which is where the social mobility stuff comes in. We measure social return on investment for those charities who are really trying to get funding, which is so difficult right now, and help them evidence their projects really making a difference, sustainable difference. And we build in the MTQ, as you mentioned.
Brilliant. So I know that you are just coming to the end of a remarkable project that's in the Black Country. For those outside of the UK, that's right in the middle of the UK. And it's working with young offenders. It'd be helpful if you told us a little bit about the project, about what the hoped for outcomes were, why you integrated mental toughness into it, and an indication of the kind of results that have been achieved, because they are spectacular.
Okay, so Black Country was part of a talent match project. So initially there was 21 projects that were commissioned from a big lottery, and there were 21 community projects across the UK that were commissioned, and the project's been running now for 8 years. We got started right at the beginning, and their initial project was to look at those that are furthest from the labour market, those that have been in care, offending background, had troubles with alcohol and drug dependency. So those that were likely to be forgotten, and actually that became Black Country's strapline of nobody left behind. When we initially put in our bid, if you like, to support the project with regards to measuring their social return on investment, we also looked at how they worked with the people on programme, their participants, the mentees, and we built in mental toughness there. One of the things they talked about was building people's confidence, and that was kind of the hook for me. They wanted to evidence that they could 100% increase everybody's confidence that they touched within the programme. That's a really big ask, and it was, so how can you prove it? So that for me was a bit of an opener in the tender to say, well, I've got something we could use that we could evidence that you did that. So that's kind of was our opener to the mental toughness, I guess. And the team at Black Country really enjoyed the concept. They got it, they understood around the levels of mental toughness, that bounce back, resilience, everything that their participants would really need to flourish in a new world, really, because they had been, we're looking third, fourth generation of worklessness. We are looking at families that have dad may be in prison, uncle's in prison. So it's culturally part of the way that they were, and they knew they had some really big barriers to overcome. So what the mental toughness gave them was not only this impact measure, which is something that was really, really important to show that did we really increase everybody's confidence. However, it also gave the mentors a way to really work with the mentees, to work with them on a one-to-one level. Once the project had been, so 5 years, the project was commissioned. What they found out is that they were really, really successful with those that had an offending background. So when they reached their end of their funding, they managed to get another 3 years just as a target, those offenders, because what they realised is that they had a really, really great impact by using the mental toughness scores. They were able to work with them on a one-to-one basis. They did a lot more hand-holding. They broke down lots of preconceptions. So the idea that if you've been in prison, you must be mentally tough because you've been through the system, that's complete fallacy. These young guys were coming out of prison with, the things that they went in with no home, no community, their network. They really did need that wraparound support. So it's really enabled them to move forwards. And the results were brilliant. But what we knew was that people that were coming into project, when we assessed them to begin with, their mental toughness scores as an average was a 3.7, which we knew was significantly lower than what would be expected to, I guess, as you would call an average result for an adult being around 5.2. We knew that they were more sensitive in those areas, and you could see from their backgrounds, I guess, why that might be, but how their behaviours, how they would respond. That's what the mental toughness allowed the mentors to really understand. So somebody that was low on confidence, what wraparound support would they need to give them? So our mentors were picking them up outside the gates. They were taking them to their housing meetings. They created this relationship, and that's why that one-to-one support with this cohort was so important. Especially, we also did it through COVID. So that was the other thing. Everybody was so removed, and I think we really underestimate the power of connection. So having that mentor that really understood that participant was a massive help for them.
That's fantastic. At the end of the podcast, we will ask you for contact details. So anybody who wants to look at the data will be able to get in touch with you directly. What I'm interested in is you've used this very successfully with a group of people. And I'm very often told, oh, you'll never get young offenders. You'll never get people like that to complete a questionnaire. But you seem to have gotten to complete the questionnaire and get something from it. How did that happen?
I guess they believed in the process to start from. It was because the way that we built the programme, it was a part of us helping them. So the way that it was introduced, the way that the package was delivered to them, it wasn't an add-on. This was how we can really work with you on a one-to-one level. It's helping us know you, and it's helping you know you in lots of ways, raising those levels of awareness. And our mentees don't just complete the MTQ once, they do it 3 times because they are mentored for a period of 12 months. So we do a starter and we do a middle and we do an end result for those participants that complete their 12-month journey. And not everybody does, because very often once they've had that first meet, they've got somebody that really works with them on an individual level, they flourish and they've gone into work, volunteering or education. So for us, we didn't really have a problem getting people to complete it, because that was the contract, I guess, if you like, the verbal contract. We said, this is how we're going to work with you. And it was sold in straight away, and they were really receptive in that process.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that. I think you're absolutely right. If you explain a psychometric measure properly to a person, they will embrace it. If you just say, here is something you're going to complete, very often you get a rejection. So it sounds like that was the right approach with a potentially difficult audience.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. And all of our mentors were on board as well. That was the other thing. So the whole team within Black Country absolutely buy into the concept of mental toughness. Their work coaches understood the concept. They knew how that would really help them work with the participants. The job coaches knew, the mentors knew, the project knew. So everybody was brought on board with the value that the measure gave them, the insights that it gave them. And as you said, for the participants, just having that explained, it wasn't just, you need to fill in this piece of paper, you just need to fill in that. It was the so what. What this means is we're going to be able to really work with you on a one-to-one basis. For me, one of the things that I love about mental toughness is it stops some of that sheep dip training that you might get. Everybody needs confidence. Well, no, not everybody does. Some people don't need that. They need something completely different. In fact, lots of people need something different. So it allowed them, and for the offenders especially, for them to feel that they were being dealt with as an individual. When you've been in that, institutionalized in that way, you kind of lose your identity, the who you are, the kind of things that make you tick, your values, your beliefs, and actually they were able to work with them on a one-to-one basis that I think made them feel for the first time valued.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, really. And certainly what we try and do with the mental toughness reports is, because it does include a lot of detail, it includes a lot of different kind of subcomponents to it. It does individualize things a little bit more. How many different combinations are there again, Doug? 40,000 or something?
Just over 40,000, yes.
Yeah, so if it were a simple confidence scale, you're 1 to 10 on this, and you're just like loads of other people. So hopefully it allows them to get that. But one thing you said earlier, Joe, that I thought was really interesting was about they were almost surprised to have scored lower because of this fallacy of thinking going through tough times makes you tough. Like probably the worst phrase, very popular, is that idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, like, which is nonsense. Trauma does not make you stronger. Support makes you stronger. How did you then be able to set about, from the coaching point of view, developing mental toughness and the aspects of it with that in mind, that these people have been through difficult times and what they actually need is support and security?
So one of the brilliant things about the project and the way that it was set up was there were community hubs. So we operated out of 5 community hubs. So there was always going to be a safe space. One of the things when this project was first commissioned was we identified that the things that perhaps I used to know as being a child, those community hubs that you'd go to, the youth clubs, there aren't places to go. So it was really important that we had hubs where mentees on programme had somewhere to go to meet like-minded people. The other thing was that one-to-one mentoring. So I trained all the mentors so they were all familiar with the mental toughness, they were all familiar with different tools and techniques, and we very much focused on solution-focused mentoring. So we looked at all the strengths that a person brought rather than the problems that lots of people had seen. And so that one-to-one support, as you said, where it is very much that wraparound, they had that from the mentor. What the mental toughness gave them is they gave them ways to work with that person, and it gave them a really quick way to build rapport, because we had 12 months to work with somebody, which feels like a really long time. But when you're talking with significant trauma, when you're talking about somebody that has been in prison for a period of time, 12 months is nothing. They haven't even got a home to start with, and don't let me start talking about the housing shortage. That's the first thing these guys have to do. So while 12 months might feel like a long time in our world of L&D or OD, to support somebody when they've gone through multiple challenges of what is deemed by perhaps society as multiple, they have multiple complex needs. 12 months is not a long time to really support somebody, to get them to feel settled. If we look at that kind of that fundamentals, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these guys don't have any of that to start with. So that one-to-one support was really crucial. And that's how we got, I guess, everything to work and everything to click together, if that answers the question, John.
Yeah, it does. Do you work kind of with other bodies in terms of like an advocacy thing now? Because I can sense that you're on the verge of going on to a rant about property, and understandably so. But I know when a young offender comes out of any kind of setting, they kind of need that advocacy, right? They don't have a place to go. They don't necessarily have the money, and not just a crossroads, but a spaghetti junction, really. So to what extent does the coaching sort of have the individual coaching, but also an advocacy kind of role, linking them in with other areas?
I guess that's what made us a unique partner for Black Country, because our speciality are relationships with housing. So what we were able to do is help them to put together partnerships, co-working. We introduced them to other providers in the area. They also looked at commissioning. So they've got something that's called a preferred supplier network. So there were special services. So counselling, mentees could get counselling from the service. They could be linked directly in. If somebody needed basic maths English, they could get that. If somebody needed basic fundamental things like a washing machine or emergency accommodation, they had a network of support. The project was really well commissioned to look at what are going to be some of the barriers the participants on programme are going to have, and what might we need to have in place. So yes, they were able to be advocates for them. They were able to have those warm contacts of, actually, this is an emergency accommodation, so you can come out and we can help you. They also got really great at understanding the world of benefits and helping them apply for universal credit and things like that, just to start them off. Food banks, there were links with local YMCA charities. So there was a great network of support, and that's what makes this project, I think, really unique, is that partnership working, is that there's so many funded projects that work insular, they work independently, and actually you can't be one thing to all people.
Yeah, you kind of get those foundations in place, and like you say, you're thinking of a hierarchy of needs there, I suppose. That makes an awful lot of sense.
Joe, I've watched the project through your eyes. I know that there's a report about to be published, and I know that the report is talking about the successes at the project level, but I also know that you are actually mapping every single individual journey through the project, which is something that's kind of reinforcing the idea that this is effective not only at a group level, but it's actually effective at an individual level. Can you tell us something about some of the highlights, some of the big outcomes for the project and for some of the individuals, perhaps?
I guess if we're looking at it from a data level, what we know is that from an MTQ basis, participants significantly have increased their mental toughness scores throughout the programme. We actually know that some of those that we are most successful with are those that have got an offending background, and equally those that have left care, which again was really interesting from some of the data. Those were the ones that perhaps came into the project more sensitive, and those that they seem to have, I guess, a bigger growth, which was quite interesting. the success, I guess, from an individual level is that participants have got fantastic results. We measure the social return on investment of the project. As I mentioned, we're able to evidence a social return on investment of this project to around £45,000 per person on programme, which is significant when you think about the numbers of people that we work with. But yeah, we get a lot of growth. Challenge and confidence are one of those ones that we've been really successful with, and confidence specifically, I think, it's the one that's really kind of forgotten but makes the most difference, especially with this cohort, because confidence can be confidence to leave the house, confidence to get on the bus. You're trying to get people into work. If you don't work on those things, how can they get to work if they've never left their home? Some of the participants were in that situation on programme. So really being able to help them. And by measuring the mental toughness intermittently, what we were able to do is also show the participant their growth, because sometimes you don't realise how far you've come. So they don't realise that they came in ones and twos, which we know from the data says that is an extreme sensitivity, and now they're 4s and 5s, and they don't realise the impact that has on them. Not only when we're saying, we can see that's really different, you look at the fact that you're now running a project, you're running a group within the hub, you might be running a movie night or a hobby night or a book club, or you've now started making friends on projects. So you can tangent, but it gives them something to say. Well, you were here and you are now here. That's huge. And the reports then tell them that it's different. The wording in the reports is different. So it really does enhance their growth, I think, and that's really useful. So there's been massive achievements throughout the project. They've been able to get people not only into work but sustainable work, and I think that's a real key one for me. Lots of people can tick got them into jobs, but this is sustainable work. It's work with purpose. It's really understanding the employability. The other thing that Black Country do brilliantly is work with employers. So we broke down the barriers of employing a young offender, for example. So things that they need to know and things they don't need to know, we kind of demystified some of those things. We enabled them to meet them first and kind of do some mock interviews. So equally, the participants knew what to expect on going to interview days. So trying to make that process as simple as possible. So there's been so many successes within this programme, and some really small individual personal things that for me, they may seem, like I say, small, but seeing somebody that didn't make eye contact, somebody that, when you first met them, couldn't be in a room with other people, suddenly then speak in front of 80 people at one of their conferences, telling them how the project's impacted them and the difference it makes. That stuff's really brilliant.